If you're any real Spider-Man fan, you might know something about a scrapped Spider-Man film written by James Cameron. Yeah, this guy. Responsible for films like Avatar, The Terminators. James, draw me like one of your French girls. Cameron sat down and wrote an entire script for a potential Spider-Man movie in 1992. But due to how ridiculous the situation was with the Spider-Man rights back then, the project dragged on for far too long before getting off the ground, and James abandoned the project out of boredom. What a fake fan. The potential script floated around for years, until an incredible storyboarded Scriptment was started in 2001 and finally finished in 2016 by one Daniele Tomasi. These drawings are incredible, and I'm not gonna lie, they made sitting through this thing a lot more tolerable. I had to sit down and take notes when reading this damn thing. But when I finally read the script, I actually found it very interesting. I thought James Cameron's vision of the Spider-Man origin was really cool. It's filled with unique Spider-Man moments never done before, and shows Peter Parker in a much more honest and humbling light, on top of making him a bit of a pervert. But that's enough dissing the story before I even tell you it. I'm gonna go all the way through the script for you, telling you the story James once planned to tell himself, and stop every now and again to give you my thoughts. This is James Cameron's Spider-Man, illustrated by Daniele Tomasi, and narrated for you by me, PSM. The script describes an incredible opening shot, the camera pulling back on webs which fade into eyes, and pull back even further, we see a mask, and the eyes disappear into the glass. No fucking way, it's Spider-Man! Daniele does an incredible job drawing him here. He looks amazing. The spider iconography is all well done, with unique lenses and a nice logo too. And then, he speaks. Welcome to one of my favorite night spots. The service is slow, but the thing I like about it, it's not usually too crowded. It all looks so civilized from up here, doesn't it? Like there's some kind of logic to it all. It's all so clear. But then, you get down there on the street, and nothing's clear. Spider-Man then descends to the street and buys a newspaper about himself. The owner rushes out the door and looks on top of his kiosk. There's nothing there. He looks up, all around. Nothing. He grins and holds his fist in the air. All right! I'm going to be voicing a lot of this stuff myself, so bear with me. Cut back to Spider-Man, who has been on top of the World Trade Center this entire time. Guys, stop. Guys, stop. It's 1992. It hasn't happened yet. How can I expect them to get it? I don't even get it. I do wish they'd at least get my name right. It's Spider-Man, not the Spider-Man. Jeez. Boneheads. I need a better publicist. Spider-Man then rips the entire paper into tiny little pieces and loses the shreds in the wind. And as the papers transition into the next scene, the script introduces us to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. They're pretty much textbook. Aunt May is very doting, and Uncle Ben honestly doesn't even seem too noteworthy yet. And then the script gets to describing Peter. Peter loses his parents as a young boy, only 6 years old when his parents died in the plane crash. James writes, somehow, he always felt guilty that they had went away, as if he had done something wrong. After his parents' death, he has moved from his parents' house in Maryland and is shacked up with his aunt and uncle in Flushing, New York, which the film dubs a boredom zone. At school, Peter is mocked by his peers for being a poor, nerdy, socially reserved, quote-unquote, virgin. God damn, that is fucking brutal. He has a superiority complex due to his status, seeing himself as more intelligent than his fellow students who constantly mock him. He loves science and understanding the universe. The script says, he's got true grit, but he just doesn't know it. Later, we see Peter in class, daydreaming about Mary Jane. Suddenly, she asks him to be his partner in biology, since she needs an A in this class to reach a B average so her parents will get her a car they promised. Peter is flustered by her presence, but he knows he has no hope. She's dating Nathan McCreary, aka Flash. What? Why did they have to change his name? What difference does Nathan McCreary make against Flash Thompson? I mean, I guess this guy's a little more evil than Flash. You'll get to see more of that later. But this script does a lot of character changing, sometimes varying in difference. Nathan here is smack dab in the middle. He still serves the same purpose as Eugene Flash Thompson, but he acts a little differently. Anyway, Peter almost sees MJ as a celebrity. He is envious of her social status, and the script even says, Peter oscillates between despising her and fantasizing about saving her from a burning building, so she will be eternally grateful to him, and maybe even kiss him. Dude, this guy's a fucking loser. Anyway, dickhead Flash shows up in his Porsche, picks MJ up, and Peter is laughed off by Flash and his loser friends. Peter walks off into the city and ends up at a science college he hopes to attend himself. A science experiment goes on, one containing genetically altered flies. These 10 flies possess synthesized transfer RNA, and one of them has been picked off and eaten by a spider. And after this, the 2002 spider bite scene pretty much happens bar for bar. Just imagine that scene in your head, and that's pretty much how the film does it here. Peter stumbles out of the science hall. Reality starts to leave him as he's flashed with visions of what the script calls a spider world. He is racked by a convulsive tremor. Like a seizure, he is plunged into a psychotropic state, an abyss of dark visions which yawn beneath him. He falls into the maelstrom, barraged by hallucinatory manifestations, disturbing images of webs, from a POV as if crawling over them, glistening eyes in the dark, sudden predatory lunges, prey struggling hopelessly to escape. A David Lynch bio-horror montage of Spider World. I read that, that's what it says verbatim. Shadowy images of rooftops, crawling over buildings and fences, leaping through the dark air. Peter regains full consciousness in his underwear at the top of a tall tower. This is an interesting start, and there's a bit of a modification to the origin here that opens an interesting question. Is Peter part fly? If the spider eating the fly gave it the power to pass its abilities on to Peter, did the fly pass on the abilities of its RNA transferring? Did it send any fly traits all the way through to Peter? Does Peter have the ability to pass on his powers? This must ensure that his children will have spider powers, and maybe even anyone he shares too much DNA with, like MJ or Johnny Storm. Peter finds himself locked away in his basement, skipping school after finally making it home. He's huddled in the corner, shaking and completely pale. He's tweaking. A spider lowers in front of him, shining within a stray beam of light from the basement window. It's almost angelic. Night falls, and Peter finally leaves the basement. He passes through the house, making quick conversation with Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and he stares into the bathroom mirror, and he appears to look normal, and yet his wrists hurt, and his vision has gone from blurry to 20/20. Peter is exhausted after this whole ordeal, and he finally sleeps soundly. The next morning, he wakes up and appears to have hit a bit of a goon in his sheets. Nope, it's spider webs. Come on now, don't be inappropriate. Peter's gonna do a lot more of that for us later. Peter inspects his wrists and sees some web holes and accidentally spooks himself in the face. Peter is so pissed off and confused by these powers that he runs out of his house in his pajamas. He fucking sprints past a guy so hard, he knocks the mail out of his hand. He's almost hit by a truck, running so fast that he came out of nowhere to the driver's point of view. Peter slowly starts to gain control over these powers. Before, these weird abilities would only get Peter into uncomfortable hijinks, but now, he's lifting cars, swinging around on trees with his wrist sauce. And yet, no one at school can tell he's any different. Peter already actively hides his differences from others. But now, he's got to hide that he's not only a major fucking turbo nerd, but also a mutated freak spider nerd. Despite this, Peter suddenly decides to do his final term project on spiders. Mary Jane is disgusted, but Peter only does this in hopes he can learn more about what's happening to him. The script then cuts to Peter practicing some web slinging in a junkyard after school. We see Peter, quote, learning to control the flow, the diameter, the dispersion, etc., like a real spider does. We see him practicing web making, screwing up, getting more accurate. Then gunslinger moves, shooting the stuff around, nailing a pop can in midair. The area is completely covered in webs. A total mess. Peter then goes home and devours the fridge to replace the proteins he used blasting out in the yard. Peter tries to stay inside and do his homework, not letting his new life tempt him. But his window is wide open. Peter stares at the window for a long time, before finally leaping out into the night. He runs and jumps from roof to roof, the moon and stars being his only witnesses. Peter runs out into the city, learning to leap and climb across it. The script goes on. We explore the idea that the lure of the dark replaces the fear of the dark. That the dark becomes a comforting, nurturing place for Peter, rather than a place of dread and uncertainty. He feels at home in the dark, secure there. It is a place he seeks for solace, for peace. Everything is backward for him. Night becomes his day. Heights previously terrifying now attract him. The air becomes his water. He swims weightless where other mortals would plummet and break. He is at home in places others fear, and it stirs something dark inside him. A predatory urge. Peter then stalks a random guy for 5 minutes, just because he can. He then starts power tripping and goes to Mary Jane's house. He looks through her bedroom window, sees her changing to go to bed, and is so gooned up by the sight of indecent MJ that he falls into her bushes, the bushes outside of her house. Now, these 2 moments are the stepping stones in a larger arc that James Cameron is trying to showcase for Peter. James is showing us what power unchecked by responsibility looks like, so he can contrast it with a version of Peter molded by his newfound spider morality. Now, to be fair, this is a really fucked way of doing it. James often tries to tempt Peter Parker with a weird, perverted dark side throughout this story. That same dark side that Peter is on the brink of in these moments right now. And yet, Peter pulls away, and we see him in school. His grades are now free-falling. Peter figures that there must be some way to make money with these spider powers, and summoning a piece of cardboard and a Sharpie, the script reads, he writes human spider on the cardboard. Thinks about it. Nah. He turns it over and writes man spider. Nah. He gets another piece and writes Spider-Man. Nah. He turns it over to write something else. And then he turns it back. Looks at it. That's what the script says. It says, We then cut to Peter in an all-black variant of his original Masked Marvel outfit. Very nice, very nice. And he's swinging around on New York poles like a stripper for money. Well, not really. He's street performing on the boardwalk Rockaway. Peter's asked by some guy if he does private parties, and Peter figures, yeah, sure, why not? The guy tells him he should get a better suit, though. Cut to my favorite part of any Spider-Man movie, Peter making the suit. The script lists Peter drawing some bad designs in class, and then he ends up buying a red and blue dance skin from a dance studio. We see him drawing the web pattern on with liquid thread, and various other tasks to complete his spandex costume. He puts together a fake set of web shooters. Peter will tell people that these high-tech bracelets allow him to spin his webs. But underneath that lie is the fear of people seeing Peter as a freak for his new powers. But I mean, what difference does it really make, though, if you spin webs out of your wrist as opposed to the web shooters? You're still a kooky guy running around in spandex, climbing walls and jumping 30 feet in the air. I mean, maybe those powers are a little more tame than wrist-gerbating webbing, but who cares? Peter begins to slowly mold his Spider-Man persona, giving himself a deeper voice and crazy poses. The script reads, we see him becoming a different person. Spider-Man is born out of Peter the boy. Spider-Man is everything Peter is not. Confident, cocky, powerful, physical, smooth, ready with a snappy one-liner. We see long repressed aspects of Peter coming out, being given form and substance behind the mask. Spider-Man then begins to make several appearances. He performs at an upscale party for $50, and later ends up being interviewed on live TV, where he ends up explaining his web shooters. But among the many first hearing of Spider-Man through their television set, there is one man, Carlton Strand. He sits among many TVs, all playing footage of Spider-Man. He's in an expensive room, wearing expensive clothes too. He calls a man into his room, Boyd. He tells him to find out everything he can about this Spider-Man. Boyd walks off, and you'd be right to think he looked a little familiar. Spider-Man begins to voice over, detailing Strand's origin story. But he wasn't always Carlton Strand any more than I was always your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. At one time, he was just a punk named Carl, a 2-time loser about to go down for a 3rd time. It was 10 years ago that Strand got his cosmic tap on the shoulder. There's a dying man in his backseat, named Bobby. He has a gunshot wound in his stomach, and he, quote, isn't holding up his side of the conversation. Bobby is never mentioned again. Carlton ends up running into a field of lightning towers to lose the police, and is struck with a bolt that's 10 times past fatal, his body shaking in the air before falling motionless to the ground. He then gets up. After a long hike, Strand finds a pickup truck and accidentally manages to turn the damn thing on. He realizes that the lightning bolt supercharged his body, giving him insane electrical powers. He takes off all the way back to New York, and on the long way there, he stirs with his newfound ability. He then goes home, finds his old crew, and electrifies them all to death. Apparently, they had set Carlton and his pal Bobby up on a job they knew the police were onto. After killing his old gang of criminals, he assumes their position in the world of crime. He begins to realize that the amount of money these guys were making isn't worth his time, and it made him start to renovate the entire operation from the ground up.
We've got to have money.
Eventually, he got so powerful that he could use his electrical powers to tax a penny out of every single bank account in the United States of America. And with that power, he became incredibly rich. The script describes him as a mix between Donald Trump and Milken, which is really funny because James Cameron did not know how much more evil Trump could get with time, and this thing was written in 1992. Anyway, we come to find out that Strand actually has a girlfriend. As they begin to get intimate, you realize she's wearing a rubber wetsuit. This is because Electro here can't actually touch other people without pumping them with millions of volts. He is forced into a life of physical isolation, robbed of any chance at normal intimacy. He tells her he wants her, not the rubber. She refuses, and James writes, Strand doesn't like the concept of no. He takes her in his arms and kisses her, with passion and more. That's the thunder going off in the back chat. Her hair begins to straight out with the electrostatic charge. She begins to convulse, in tiny shivers at first, but then, like an epileptic, she suddenly goes limp. Her eyes stare fixedly at the ceiling. He drops her on a couch. He stands there in misery and isolation. Strand has the Midas touch. He has everything and nothing. His electrical sense gives him the power to manipulate computer bank transfers, the stock market, etc., to make himself a billionaire, to sit at the center of the world's great electronic web and feel its vibrations. So he has everything. But he cannot touch another person or shake hands without a great effort of will to control his electrical potential. And if he lets his guard down in an intimate moment with a woman, he will kill her with the high voltage discharge. His love is deadly. So he has learned to live without love, without the comfort of human touch, emotion, or contact. So he has nothing. He quickly unzips the front of her wetsuit and puts his hands under the rubber. Zap! Her body arches. He steps back, scowling, impatient. Her eyes flutter open, and she struggles to breathe. This is part of my problem with this movie. Strand is obviously evil. Of course he is. He's supposed to be the antagonist of this story. So it makes sense that he would do something like this, violating a woman's consent in a unique and shocking way. But what I don't like is having Spider-Man in this same league. This league being a sex offender list. Peter Parker is a character that goes through an important character arc to turn into Spider-Man, the man burdened by the need to be good. Peter Parker must have negative traits to put down before he learns that with great power comes great responsibility. In the original comic, it was Peter's outright selfishness, brought on by his isolation from the rest of the social world. And a lot of adaptations choose to make those traits things like spite or anger. And James Cameron has done the same thing with his Spider-Man. Except he adds being a pervert into the mix for a minute there. What is James Cameron trying to say about men with power? Is a man with power always someone who will abuse it sexually? Even Spider-Man is still a man. Is that what he's saying? I'll touch on this weird element of the story more later, since it's something that comes up repeatedly but I'm noticing that this film's idea of the dark side usually involves some sexual misconduct. It's weird. Why are we... Evil doesn't always have to be inherently fucking rapey. It's just lazy. Weird. Anyway, if you haven't put 2 and 2 together yet, Carlton Strand is basically Electro, but with no suit. I mean, I guess he's as greedy as the original Electro. I bet this guy would dream of being Carlton Strand. But I mean, at that point, is he even Electro anymore? Are these two even the same guy? Carlton is so off the deep end when compared to someone like the Flash of this universe, with so little traits to tie back to one character in Spider-Man mythos. The only thing these two share are their powers. Anyway, Peter and MJ are honestly starting to get along, which is quite surprising considering Peter won't stop talking about spiders all the time. And this pisses off Flash a whole lot. The part with him getting along with Mary Jane, not the spiders. Flash walks over and tears into Peter. James writes, Peter just clenches his jaw and backs away. Peter does not believe in violence, and he has never thrown a punch in his life. It just wouldn't occur to him. Flash grabs MJ and storms off. Peter follows them, only to see Flash slap MJ. Peter's mindset from earlier is completely changed in that moment. He waits outside of the school for Flash to get off practice and surprises him from behind. Flash throws a punch and is hurt by Peter's immovable body. Peter picks up Flash and smacks him like a bitch. And he smacks him back and forth and back and forth. Put some sound effects in there. He punches Flash so hard, he flies back 10 feet. He then walks Flash over to his car and slams him into it. Over and over and over and over and over. And to add insult to injury, he destroys Flash's car with a signpost. Stay away from Mary Jane, or else. Peter runs away.
I wonder if every hero remembers their first punch. Well, I do. Maybe it was all the bullies over the years kicking the skinny kid around. All that stored up rage just came out so fast it was scary. For a split second, I wanted to kill him. It's a good thing his car was there. I always hated that Porsche.
Peter is shaken by what he's done. It made him feel great, which scares him even more. He rides the subway out into the city and changes into Spider-Man in a bathroom. He runs across rooftops, swinging out into the night, and Peter sees the city for what it is up there. It's a horrible cesspit of violence and greed, where those who need help never find it. Peter doesn't understand why there's so much pain out in the world, and his powers have only managed to show him how much there really is. Peter is not emotionless. This stuff really takes a toll on him. He sits in his room alone in the dark, just thinking. Uncle Ben says to him, I know I'm not very good at this father thing, Pete. You came into my life 20 years past my prime time, and I know you're wrestling with things now that I can't help you with much. I was your age once, and I know it's hard to imagine, and it was the most painful, confusing time of my entire life. I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers for you, but I want you to know that we're here for you, May and I. You can talk to us, and if you're having problems, we'll understand. Peter sees how much Ben really means the things he says. He wants to truly connect with him, but how can he even begin to explain Spider-Man to him? He tells Ben that everything is okay, and the two say goodnight to one another. And of course, as soon as Ben leaves the room, Peter goes right back out into the fucked up city that made him so sad in the first place. Hey man, can you please stop beating your wife? Anyway, Pete didn't learn his lesson about stalking MJ because now he's doing it in the Spider-Man suit. Peter sees MJ getting yelled at by her father. He discovers that her home life is a living hell with mean-spirited and abusive parents. Mary Jane is desperately unhappy, living behind her mask of the popular girl. She has no one to share her pain. Peter is struck by the parallel in their lives. This part of Peter and Mary Jane's relationship is hardly touched on by a lot of adaptations. I know average Spider-Man fans probably think very little of Peter and Mary Jane, especially considering the amount of hit pieces out on Mary Jane, But this one trait James hints at is something I need to see more. In the original Spider-Man comics, MJ saw Spider-Man sneaking out of Peter's house the night of Uncle Ben's killing, immediately knowing Peter was Spider-Man. MJ kept this secret as she got to know Peter. But knowing he was Spider-Man, and watching him desperately try to hide it, struck something in her. She realized that she and him were one and the same. People who hide their true selves behind masks. Peter's true self behind Spider-Man, and Mary Jane behind the fun-loving party girl. And I'm tired of people acting like these two aren't perfect for each other. If you like Gwen more, you've just been poisoned by the movies. I'm sorry. Don't you dare bring up comic book Gwen. She didn't even know Peter was Spider-Man. And she fucking hated Spider-Man. You can't fucking hate Spider-Man and be the one for Peter. I'm sorry. Anyway, Spider-Man does his amazing act on a late-night show, wowing the crowd with his flips and web-based acrobatics. After the show, Cordelia appears backstage. She hands Spider-Man a note that reads, "There are others like you." The note has an address and a meeting time, and after reading the note, the lady is gone. Spider-Man runs outside after her, only to be grabbed by Boyd, Strand's right-hand man from earlier. Boyd is the Sandman. I assume Electro sent him out here to make sure Spider-Man didn't follow Cordelia, because after this short scuffle, Sandman just simply dissolves away, and Spider-Man is left by himself in the alley. So anyway, after this show, Peter's got to get paid. He lies to Uncle Ben to get him to take him to his booking agent's building, and once Peter is inside, he changes into Spider-Man, only to find his agent is broke, and he tells Spider-Man to beat it. But while leaving the building, Spider-Man sees a robbery in progress. Peter doesn't give a shit, and he ends up just staring at the guy who goes on to kill his uncle. After the short staring contest, the robber runs off. A fat security guard chases after him, and stops short when he sees Spider-Man. He asks him for help, and Peter says, "It's not my job." You all know what's about to happen. Ben is dead as he lays. No final goodbye, or short words coughed up in blood. That's all Peter gets. Peter, of course, finds the killer as usual, who does nothing unique except call Peter a slur. It's the same robber from the booking agent's building. Peter is heartbroken when he realizes he could have saved Ben. James writes, "The power, the speed, the strength to do it, all his now. But he didn't use it responsibly. The crushing weight of the responsibility that goes with power suddenly descends on him. He releases the guy, his anger gone. He is overwhelmed by guilt. He raises his hands and shoots webbing all over the guy." Two cops are driving around when suddenly Spider-Man drops right in front of their path with a fresh murderer in his hands. Of course, after slamming the killer onto their cop car, the police exit the vehicle and try to arrest Spider-Man, resulting in a scuffle between Peter and the police. This event ends up being aired on the news, on a station owned by none other than the man himself, J. Jonah Jameson. I really like the fact that Jameson drops into Spider-Man's life at this very moment. It's almost like the second Peter learns the lesson that makes him Spider-Man, Jameson appears out of thin air ready to hate him. Spider-Man, of course, is now radically altered by the death of Uncle Ben. He now sees it as his duty to fight criminals and to protect the innocent, even if it means chasing down men with a quote-unquote vengeance, or beating up cops for brutalizing people. Hey guys, this Spider-Man beats up cops, okay? Isn't that a little bit cool, huh? Can't we forget about the gooning? So anyway, with all that crime stopping, criminals hate Spider-Man too. So not only is Jameson making the public hate Spider-Man, but now both the law and the lawless want him dead. Nobody loves Spider-Man, except for the people who live where he roams. James even writes about how the civilians speculate about who he is, claiming him to be black like them, Hispanic like them, or gay like them. Wait, what? I mean, there's nothing wrong with... It's the spandex, isn't it? You want to know who else really likes Spider-Man? Mary Jane. And Peter wants to tell her real bad. James even notes that MJ relates to Spider-Man's need to mask, referencing the same thought Peter had earlier. Mary Jane walks home from school, off to a private place she goes to think. Spider-Man follows her from high up, stalking her from a distance. And as MJ leaves, she's grabbed into a junkyard by some punks. Spider-Man flies in and makes quick work of them, and ends up swinging off with MJ in his arms. She loves the feeling of flying. James describes it as a wild fantasy ride for her. Peter stops on top of the Unisphere, literally taking MJ to the top of the world. They sit there together, and she leans onto him. And with the confidence which the mask gives him, he kisses her through the fabric. Jump cut to Spider-Man swinging over to the place Cordelia showed him a couple days before Uncle Ben died. He is met by Cordelia and Strand! I meant Strand. Strand begins to tell Spider-Man his motive, which I'll read word for word from the script. Strand is looking for others like him, exceptional people, people who have been touched by fate through some cosmic fluke, people who have been given some power which elevates them above the teeming masses. Strand then begins to tell Spider-Man about the only other person he could find, Sandman. This is when we get to hear Boyd's backstory. And, it's not too interesting. Boyd was a low-paid maintenance worker, working at some military research facility. One day, they end up running an experiment without clearing the lower levels of the building, and an explosion goes off down there. Boyd is caught in this explosion, giving him his incredible sand powers. Even before, Boyd was an asshole, but now he was an even bigger asshole with superpowers. Strand ends up taking in Sandman, and that brings us back to now. Strand, Cordelia, Boyd, and Spider-Man, all standing in this lavish-ass room. Strand invited Peter over to his Manhattan mansion, and Peter just said fuck it and went. Spider-Man looks around, enamored by all the artwork and antiques Strand has. Strand sits at the other end of the room, at a tank of electric eels. He's stroking them as he sips a martini. What? Strand asks Peter who he is, and Peter rejects him. Immediately moving on, Strand begins to detail his motives even deeper. Strand believes that him, Boyd, and Spider-Man are of a higher class of people, the kind to rule over those less powerful than them. It's only nature, human evolution. James writes, "Natural selection honors the efficient predator." Strand represents giving into power. After all, the moment he got his powers, he committed several murders and used them to make himself a super millionaire. Peter wants to represent the exact opposite of this. Peter believes that with great power comes great responsibility. But Peter isn't as responsible as he could have been, wasn't as responsible as Strand was evil. There are clear moments in this film where Peter abuses his power. When he spies on Mary Jane in her home, when he beats Flash. And to be fair, Flash hit first, but Peter is like a god compared to the puny Flash. Peter is a man with great power, and if he wants to truly oppose Strand, he must be the exact opposite of him morally. And then Cordelia starts trying to seduce Peter. What? Okay, sorry, that caught me off guard, but let me keep going, because James is trying to write a moment here that illustrates how much Peter has grown as a character, I guess. Strand tells Spider-Man he can get hella hoes if he joins him. Hell no! I'm not interested in your hoes. And I don't know if I like you so much anymore either. You use your powers for your own sake, ignoring the responsibility that comes with them. And if that's the case, then we're enemies. Strand fires a massive beam, stunning Peter immediately. Electro realizes he might have made the mistake of going too fast, assuming Peter would immediately give in to his worldview. He attempts to take off Peter's mask. He swats his hand away and leaps into action. Boyd even joins the fight, and the place gets fucking destroyed. Peter doesn't even bother to say anything anymore. He simply just leaps out the window, escaping into the city. This moment is the catalyst for Strand's hunt for Spider-Man. He stands around his destroyed room, studying it, looking at Spider-Man's web. He is thinking, plotting, on how he will destroy Spider-Man. He buys a TV station, the one that owns Jameson's show, and he gives Jonah an unlimited budget solely for making propaganda about Spider-Man. He then sends an army of goons dressed as Spider-Man out into the city to commit crimes in his name, ruining any reputation Spider-Man might have had. Even the people who loved Spider-Man before think negatively of him, and his suit is busted from the fight with Strand and Boyd. He has this cute little scene where he's looking around for a place to buy a new suit, and he just ends up finding one in a store, now being sold due to Spider-Man's recent popularity. It was $120, which adjusted for inflation is about $267. Jesus. Peter's life only gets so much worse from this point on. Peter will have a crisis of faith, where the burden of the world's ills becomes so overwhelming that he feels paralyzed. His new power is partially about the power to see and the responsibility to not turn his head away. He can go into shadows, look into the windows, and watch us all from above, and he will see human nature for what it is. He will enter a moral twilight zone, where victims and the crimes are not so clear-cut, where it is hard for a well-meaning crusader to jump in and help or save when victims must be saved from themselves, or a society which grinds them down. And how can one man, one boy, really make a difference? The tide of injustice and pain is too great, too overwhelming. And then Spider-Man accidentally Gwen Stacy's a young robber too. That sucks. And now Aunt May's bills are piling up. The script then decides to place a huge pile of money in front of Spider-Man. He's standing in a drug dealer's base, in front of all of their earnings, tempted by what he could do with this money. I figured being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man would get easier as it went along. Well, I'm waiting, his hands reaching slowly for the stack of bills. He looks into the eyes of the drug dealer. What the hell are you looking at? He leaps out the window with the money. What was I gonna do? Track down all the crackheads and give it back? Anyway, I figure there's more than one way to be a saint in this world. But I've got to tell you, even fighting the Sandman was easier than turning that bag upside down. I like this moment, because it really feels like for a second there, Spider-Man was going to break. He was going to seep back into the version of himself that took the easy way out, giving into temptation by using his powers for misdeeds of various sizes. We begin to close in on the final confrontation. Strand has tried his hardest to break Spider-Man, and yet he cannot. He closes in on Queens, the area Spider-Man is seen in the most. The script then cuts to a TV interview, with Mary Jane in the front center. Mary Jane says, "It is ridiculous what they say about him on TV. Spider-Man saved my life. He is a kind and caring person, and we should be thankful he's here for us at all." And I'm assuming Sandman saw this shit, because he ends up following Mary Jane around for a little bit. You know, if I had a nickel for every time MJ was stalked by a superhuman in this story... Anyway, MJ's sitting out in one of her private spots, when suddenly, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man drops in for a little pookie time. She is as light as a feather in his arms. She screams like a kid riding Colossus. In fear and exhilaration, they pass us. Her screams continue, fading, as he carries her up to the dizzying heights above us. They then have spider mating ritual sex on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm being dead fucking serious. Just look at this shit. I don't want to read this. Oh, and by the way, MJ still doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man during this, despite him unmasking for sex with her. The script says she wasn't looking. And now, MJ loves handling the spiders at school. And Sandman knows this. He goes back to Strand, showing him footage of Spider-Man swinging off with MJ. And on his command, Boyd sneaks into her house and kidnaps her, leaving nothing but sand at the scene. And at the same time, Strand leaks the footage of Spider-Man running off with MJ. And with no other evidence on MJ's disappearance, the public assumes Spider-Man is behind her capture. And despite it all, Spider-Man leaps into action. He instantly books it into Strand's mansion. And once he gets there, James writes, he finds Cordelia dead. Strand was in such a hurry, didn't have time to jumpstart her after his farewell kiss. Okay, I gotta step in here for a second, because this is another moment I find to be a little odd when put under scrutiny. Cordelia, from the beginning of this movie, is shown to be nothing but Electro's main squeeze. She suffers endless electric love, constantly enduring being shocked back to life by Electro, and yet she still carries out his every word. Why? This entire script, Cordelia lives and dies by Strand's every word, with no stated motivation, no nothing, and here she is, just dead. What does this say about her in the bigger picture? Cordelia is Strand's partner. Strand is a man of power, which the script wants you to relate back to Spider-Man. They want you to see the parallel between these two characters. And I think in some way, this is shown by how they treat the female leads. Strand wipes his ass with Cordelia until the very end. And Spider-Man is just a guy trying to find himself morally. And he does this through moments where he spies on MJ or does morally questionable things using his powers. But this script really makes the female characters just feel like people who mostly suffer under the treatment of their powered-up male cohorts. They don't do much other than that. And this is proven by Cordelia's death not really meaning anything in the grand scheme of things. It's just a ploy to show you how evil fake Electro is. And you'll notice this happens a lot more throughout the final fight. Strand doing something horribly fucking evil with no emotional payoff. He's just doing it just to show you how fucking evil he is.
I am PSM 2099, and I'm here to sell you merch, because this sorry excuse for a YouTuber hasn't made a single plug in this entire video. Want to look as cool as me, or the character I'm definitely not based on? Check out this hoodie. It even comes in blue. If you feel like wearing the wrong color, I can let one of these go for $31 plus shipping. Or how about this hoodie? Looks awfully familiar, doesn't it? It comes in navy blue, purple, and blue again. This one's even cheaper than the last. Only $27 in shipping. You could get this one, but I personally think it's pretty shocking bad. $25 is asking way too much for this. There are so much more than just these 3 hoodies available, so feel free to check out the website for yourself. It's one of the links in the description, wherever this loser put it. Anyway, I'll let this guy get back to it. One of my associates will be back in another video to sell you merch again soon.
Spider-Man finds a tape in Strand's mansion, and after playing it, he sees Strand holding MJ hostage at the World Trade Center. And boom, the SWAT team busts in that second. Spider-Man's dodging gunfire, and boom, seconds later he's flying out the window. And after minor difficulties, he's climbing up the World Trade Center as fast as he can. He crashes through the window, right into the room with Strand, MJ, and Boyd. Strand has no interest in Mary Jane the second Spider-Man enters the room. He simply tosses her back over to him. Strand makes one more attempt at convincing Spider-Man to give up his heroic act. He tells him that he's destined to fail, to be hated by New York. Strand says, "It is a myth that people need heroes. People hate heroes. Heroes make them feel bad, by creating examples they can never live up to. As long as the media can show, day after day, that people they respect and admire are just as twisted inside as they are, they're reassured. They can sleep at night. They can face their puffy faces in the mirror in the morning." Strand walks over to Spider-Man and rips his web shooters clean off. He knows they are nothing but props. Tools to keep people from thinking Peter is one step farther from being a freak. He lifts Spider-Man's wrists to show Mary Jane. Mary Jane looks a little shocked at that one. Peter sees the fear in her eyes, and his will seems to collapse. He sees everything she feels for him changing in a second. It's true. He is a freak. He is no longer human. Strand continues, telling Peter, "You may take off the costume, but you will always be Spider-Man. You are not a hero. You are a spider, a predator. You must accept your true nature and join me. Help me shake this planet down to its last nickel. You have been given a great gift. Do not squander it." Peter stares out at the vista for a long time. It all makes so much sense, and it seems to explain so much of what he feels. All this churning confusion. Strand makes one last play. He makes Boyd card in $250,000 in cash. He just wants to show Spider-Man a fraction of what they could do together. Spider-Man says, "You know, I took some money once. It was easy. It was just sitting there. It was the solution to all my problems, and nobody was there to stop me. Nobody could touch me. So I took it. And you want to know what I found out? Strand says, "Oh, please. Next you're going to tell me you gave the money back." More or less. This is a disappointment. Listen, you want to talk about fate? Maybe there is a reason for all this. Maybe I was put here to stop guys like you when nobody else has the balls. Pretty tough talk for a guy in a dance skin. Then, Strand grabs MJ as quick as he could, subjecting her to Strand's deadly electric touch. And now, shit's gonna get a little uncomfortable again, so skip here if you don't want to see this rapey ass shit. She feels the current running through her. Peter lunges forward, and Strand turns up the juice. Mary Jane cries out, and Peter stops. He can only watch helplessly as Strand toys with her life. Strand grabs her head and kisses her. The voltage makes her hair shoot straight out. Sandman holds Spider-Man in place, and MJ finally goes limp. James continues to write. Her head falls back, and Peter sees her staring eyes, pupils fixed and dilated, dead as they come. Peter can only stare in horror. Spider-Man is fucking furious. "I'll kill you! Motherfucker! You hear me? You're dead, you sick bastard!" Strand has what he wants. Spider-Man at his most predatory. He shocks MJ back to life, and Peter loses it. He fires 2 webs at MJ, pulling her from Strand's arms. Then, he breaks out of Sandman's grip, exploding him into millions of particles. Spider-Man runs across the room, avoiding electrical beam after electrical beam, and he swoops MJ off, and her screams fade out as he leaps into the night sky. Spider-Man quickly drops off MJ, ripping the door off the adjacent tower's roof exit for her. They share 2 lines. "I love you." Cool. And now that we're fresh off the heels of that moment, I want to rag for a bit. This molesтерous act of evil from Strand is so senselessly gross that it really makes me hate him for it. But not in a way that makes him like an actual interesting villain, but in a way that just makes him a vile asshole. What has he done throughout this film to establish his evil? He's made himself a millionaire, he's repeatedly violated every woman he interacts with in the plot, and he does this why? Simply just because he can. He only exists to parallel Spider-Man's entire moral code. And that just isn't enough to make him interesting in my opinion. There's no reason for him to oppose Spider-Man's entire moral code. Spider-Man is interesting because he has the power to be irresponsible, and he doesn't because it's wrong. And to give that even more basis, there's a moment that happens to Peter that changes him into being so stubborn about this. Strand is simply just an irresponsible man. Because he can be. And that makes him a lousy villain because there's no substance there. Someone who only exists to oppose Spider-Man, doing the most evil shit you can think of, simply just because he can. This kind of treatment hurts characters like MJ and Cordelia because it just makes them out to be the punching bags or the tools of society simply because they are powerless. When the film is also actively trying to convince you that normal people matter and shouldn't be playthings to those with power. What is Mary Jane's purpose in this film, other than to be Peter's crush or call to action? What is Cordelia if not Electro's little plaything? These women are objects to the plot when compared to their superpowered cohorts, illustrating that difference that Strand can see between them, instead of disproving it. It makes me feel gross reading it. I'm not saying you can't have plots about sexual misconduct, but I don't know. I just feel like this isn't how you do it. You can't treat it as simple as, this guy sexually assaults people just because he can. It's not enough for me. I just find Strand to lack any depth. His backstory, weak. His motivation, weak. His swag, weak. He is just a man on a power trip. So it's really nice to see Spider-Man finally put him out. He starts with Boyd, getting into an all-out fist fight, and finally melting him into glass with one of Strand's electrical beams. And then, after tearing his costume up with Sandman, he gets right into it with Strand. During their fight, they end up falling down the buildings. Spider-Man shoots a web to catch Strand, only for it to hit him and slam him into the side of the building, putting him out. Peter drags Strand's dying body to safety, and he takes off his mask, revealing his face to him. "What's your name, kid?" "Peter." "Parker." "Peter Parker." "Peter Parker. So what are you? Senior in high school?" "Yeah, I'd graduate next week." Strand chuckles weakly, coughing up blood from ruptured lungs. "Unbelievable." They find themselves back in the same room from before, the 250K still sitting there next to Peter and Strand. Spider-Man looks back at it. People don't notice the cloud at first. A green cloud covering the city. A cloud of $100 bills fluttering out across the city on a brisk breeze, spreading for miles. But New York notices it when it reached the street. From Central Park to the Battery, it is one big street party. On a warm evening, the first night of summer, it's raining $100 bills as far as the eye can see. Peter and MJ finally end up getting that A+ she wanted. MJ kisses Peter, but senses something familiar. This is when Peter reveals to her that he's Spider-Man by simply using his Spider-Man voice after they break away from the kiss, and she immediately puts together that he is him. They then live happily ever after, as Spider-Man narrates us off. Cut to Spider-Man, still hanging. Mary Jane and I got accepted into different colleges. Wouldn't you know it? But we still see each other every weekend. Her grades are better than mine, but I blame it on the heavy hours. It's not easy being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It takes it all out of you. Well, it's a school night. Gotta fly. Be good. He pushes off from the mast, swinging in an arc over the edge of the roof, paying out webline as he drops like an express elevator towards the street far below, tilting down to follow as he becomes a black dot above the sea of lights. A tiny spider going home. The end. Final thoughts. I love you, Daniel Tomasi. Let me say first and foremost that this video would not exist without her wonderful artwork. Daniel always manages to draw expressive faces, fluid and easy to follow movement, and always draws a great fucking Spider-Man. This work reeks of care for the character, which you can surmise even further by reading about what inspired her drawings of the character. Tomasi speculated that Spider-Man would most likely look something like his 1977 TV appearance, because it looked like something a penniless teenager would put together, much like the Peter of this script. She doesn't stop here with describing her inspiration behind the suit. She even gets into her own little review of the film, which I recommend diving into yourself, since you're here for my thoughts anyway. In my humble opinion, I think James Cameron writes a Spider-Man that would have been generally well-liked by the public. Does the script pass the Bechdel test? Kinda. Does the script do weird shit? Definitely. But underneath that, there lies a raw Spider-Man story. One that explores Peter's lack of connection to society, explores what men without responsibility will do with power, and portrays New York City as a real place with real people in it. But I don't know, I still don't think the film has a real grasp on Spider-Man's morality. Peter repeatedly makes some irresponsible choices throughout this story, like, of course, spying on MJ, beating on Flash multiple times throughout the film. Yeah, that's right, I said multiple, because I actually skipped a part. There's a scene after Peter and MJ's final kiss where Flash sees them kissing and tries to fight Peter. Of course this goes horribly wrong for Flash, as he's dodged and even caught by a webline Peter slips onto him. This is a weird moment to me, because we've gotten to the end of the film here, and Peter's proven himself to be better than the man who would use his powers to harm the powerless, and yet here he is, trouncing on Flash for fun, even risking revealing his secret identity by using his powers. Did I mention the crowd watching the fight? I know Flash and Peter have fist fought in the comics, so I suppose it's comic accurate to something, but character arc-wise, it just feels like an odd choice to put at the end of the movie, especially considering the lesson at play here. with great power comes great responsibility. I won't say it's the best Spider-Man story in the world, but if it was a real movie, I'd probably eat that shit up, yeah? I mean, what can I say, alright? I'm a Spider-Man consumer at the end of the day, okay? You knew this about me. Don't be surprised. Plus, this movie probably would have had Leonardo DiCaprio as Peter. That would have been sick. Too bad DiCaprio's too old for the spandex now. Missed opportunity. That sucks. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And I really hope I got to show you something you never saw before. I hope you guys liked my reading, some of the additional art I ended up providing for this video to help with the visuals. And if you want to support me, please leave a like or go check out the merch shop to get yourself some Spider merch. Anyway, that's all from me, folks. And I will see you in the next PSM video. I don't know when that is. Bye-bye.